Hello, ladies. Hello, ladies. Today we're going to talk about your brain on sugar. So, first of all, I just want to put it out there that our brain needs sugar in order to work. And we'll talk about what kind of sugars are the best sugars for our body. But I wanted to point out to you today that there has been a link made between insulin resistance, which we've been talking about a little bit, and Alzheimer's disease. Um, I've been looking at the work of Dr. Lisa Mosconi. I've been reading the work of Dr. Lisa Mosconi, who is a fabulous scientist, Italian woman, who studies the brain and the effects of hormonal changes on the brain in midlife. And she's one of the very few scientists who have conducted research on this area of women's health. In fact, she highlights in her book that many of the studies that we base our diagnosis, treatment, and medication plans for Lisa in her book, Lisa Mosconi points out that most of the studies that are around brain health have been conducted on either men or male mice. So she's one of the few pioneering scientists today who is studying the effects of. She's one of the pioneering. She is one of the. She's one of the pioneering scientists today who is studying women's brain health as we age and the effects of our hormonal changes on our brain health outcomes. So she talks about how we have this really important and crucial time window in perimenopause to address our future brain health. And that we really have to do it at this time because there's a hormonal switch that happens, as we've been talking about, as our entire brain and body is becoming rewired. So let's harness the energy and the opportunity in this change to create a good future for ourselves. So one of the things that I want to talk to you about is insulin resistance. And we've touched on this a little bit in terms of how the modern diet that's high in processed foods and high in fructose and high in added sugars has the potential to create metabolic problems such as diabetes and insulin resistance. So we are also more prone to insulin resistance when we are in perimenopause because of the hormonal changes that are happening within us. So that's why it's another reason to take a special care with sugar. Insulin resistance actually plays a really big role in the development of Alzheimer's disease. And you may have heard this, but Alzheimer's is actually now called diabetes type 3. Research has found that type 2 diabetes was much more prevalent in the group that they studied that had Alzheimer's disease. Take 2. Researchers have found, take 3. Researchers have found a direct correlation between type 2 diabetes and Alzheimer's disease. In fact, in a particular study on Alzheimer's disease, 81% of the patients either had type 2 diabetes or impaired fasting glucose. So they have some kind of blood sugar dysregulation. Now, insulin is produced in our pancreas, and we're going to talk about insulin more as we go along and other hormones as well. But this is a hormone that affects our cognition and our memory. It helps with the growth of neurons in our brains and synaptic plasticity. So that is the ability for our brain to kind of create new pathways and to connect with other synapses. Um, it prevents cell death and it helps with overall neurotransmission. So it is very important to our brain health. Insulin, let's do that again. Insulin is a very important hormone to our brain health. We're going to talk a lot more about insulin in coming talks and hormones in general, but I just want to point out that it is very important in our cognition and in our memory. It helps with the growth of neurons, with synaptic plasticity, and prevents cell death in our brains. It also helps with the overall neurotransmission and signaling in our brains and bodies. So when the body is unable to use insulin efficiently, it has a direct effect on our brains. Right now in the future, right? It has a direct. So that being said, we need sugar. Sugar is the fuel that our brain works with. It's important for us to get the right sugars. And it's important for us to choose sugars that are, one, high in fiber, and two, are low on the glycemic index. So what is the glycemic index? The glycemic index is how much sugar So the glycemic index is a value that's been assigned to different foods that shows how slowly or how quickly the foods can increase blood glucose levels. We want to choose foods that are lower on the glycemic index and foods that are higher in fiber, because the fiber that we eat, fiber helps keep the low fiber, and foods that are low in glycemic index allow our brain to get fuel in a more sustained way and prevent our blood sugar from rising quickly, which affects our insulin sensitivity. So this whole talk over again.